warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. We are in the 5th chapter on attitudes. This is our third video in this series. I'll quickly summarize what happened in the previous lectures. So we defined what is meant by attitude and what are the key elements of attitude. We also looked at attitudes and similar concepts like values, opinion, beliefs and ideology. We also looked at how attitudes vary from one another. So we looked at three important ideas, which is valence, which means the intensity of the attitude. Multiplicity is the complexity of the attitude, and also how central is an attitude to that person. So all these three things differentiate one attitude from another attitude, which means some attitudes are more powerful, more complex and more central, and some attitudes are not very important and they are not very intense. We also looked at how attitudes are formed. Most of these sources reflect the social group in which a person belongs to. So it can be the experiences you undergo, it also the family members and also your friends, your role models, the institutions in which you belong to. So all these social factors play a very important role in attitude formation. So in fact we looked at attitude in terms of prejudice about other social groups and how those attitudes are formed based on these sources. We also looked at the ways in which attitudes are measured in workplace or any other social context. We looked at the advantages and disadvantages in using open-ended and closed-ended questions. We also understood the kind of challenges we might face when we measure attitudes. One popular form of attitude measurement we have seen is opinion polls. So opinion polls in terms of what people think about political parties or to which political party they will vote and things like that. So these measure the attitude of individuals or voters on different political parties. Sometimes these opinion polls can fail or they may not be very accurate. Why they are not accurate or why they are inaccurate? Because of some of these reasons. So one important reason can be sampling. In a country of 130 people, you cannot take 100 people and generalize based on their opinion. So sampling can be a major challenge or major problem in generalizing survey results on attitudes. Okay, so this is till this point we saw in the previous lectures. Now we are going to look at a very interesting idea called cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance means two different kinds of attitudes, two extremely different attitudes existing at the same time within the person. Is it possible? Sometimes it is possible, but usually it happens in the rarest of the case, because like I said earlier, when we have similar attitudes together, they become very strong, and those group of attitudes don't allow us to look at newer information which is outside or which is different from our existing attitudes. So for example, if you are a fan of a particular movie star or a political leader, you must be having many different attitudes towards that person, and all of them, let's say all of them are positive in nature. So let's say if you get a new information which is not fitting into your existing attitudes about this person, you will not even consider that new information. You will either be blind towards that new information, or you will outrightly reject it as a lie. or something which is not true. You will question the credibility of the new information. But sometimes when we get very convincing information or convincing evidence that the new information or the information which we got is true, then we will have two different sets of information. So about the same person, we are forced to have two extremely opposite form of attitudes. But how can they coexist? Many a times cognitive dissonance is a temporary phenomena. Why? Because cognitive dissonance is very disturbing for us in terms of cognitive load. It makes us feel very uncomfortable in our mind. So we try to resolve this dissonance, resolve this difference, either by rejecting one thought or the other. So at any given point, it is easy to have similar kind of attitudes, either positive or negative. They should be similar in nature. But when there is a cognitive dissonance, it temporarily causes disturbance. But this disturbance, when used properly, is good for us. Why? Because it helps us question our existing ideas. So ideas which you would have believed to be true for very long period, and you would have believed it strongly for many years, when there is a cognitive dissonance, it helps you to look back at your own belief system and thought process and try to understand whether it is correct or not. So it gives you a chance to question your own assumptions, because many a times these attitudes are subjective in nature. Like I said, the cognitive element of attitude may not necessarily consist of evidences from information. It can be belief, it can be ideology, it can be an opinion, and they are subjective in nature. Subjective means it may not be completely true. It is your reality. It may not be really real. Okay. So, and sometimes they can be wrong also. In fact, many a times when we have attitudes, when we form attitudes, we see things in black and white. So life is not black and white, isn't it? You cannot say this person has, everything about this person is good or everything about this person is bad. We are all human beings. Similarly, any situation, you cannot say that situation is completely bad or completely good. It's all perspective. So that is where perception comes into picture. So your attitude influences our perception. So if you question your attitude, it is good, because you are becoming more balanced, or you are taking more of a middle path. So cognitive dissonance in a way puts you through that situation where you are given a chance to take the middle path or see the reality in a very realistic or in a very practical way. So cognitive dissonance are very powerful motivators for attitude and behavioral change. So when you want to change somebody's attitude, it's always better to give them the other information from the other end of the spectrum. Okay, so we call it devil's advocate. So sometimes it is okay to challenge your opinions. So many times we are threatened by people challenging our attitudes. They may be wrong, but even if they are wrong, it's good to listen to them. So these kind of people who challenge the mainstream idea are called devil's advocate. In fact, in earlier discussion also I have spoken about this term called devil's advocate. So it is always good to play devil's advocate within ourselves. When you strongly feel about something, you question that. You as a devil's advocate, you place the opposite argument, or the argument which is very different from what you believe in. So you do it for yourself. It will help you to, like I said earlier, to become more unbiased. Because when you have extreme attitudes, over a period of time, if you leave them unquestioned, they become ideologies. You become fundamentalist in nature. It may be right side of the spectrum or left side of the spectrum. It might be any political viewpoint, or it might be any worldview. when we stop questioning our assumptions, we become at some point extreme in nature, or we become closed persons in nature and fundamentalists in nature. Why it is important be open, or why to question our assumptions and not become fundamentalists? Why? Because unless and until you question your assumptions and avoid becoming fundamentalist, you will not grow. You will not encounter newer experiences. You will not understand the world in the real sense. So for you it will be black and white. It is not colorful. So cognitive dissonance is a good thing, even though it's very disturbing. It is a good thing. So I suggest we should create this dissonance whenever you feel your opinions are becoming stronger and stronger. Okay, so just for the sake of exercise, just to challenge yourself about your assumptions. Whether you change or not is a different story, but place the other extreme of the spectrum before yourself and try to see to what extent that is true. Okay, so so the problem with taking extreme positions because of not questioning your attitudes which gathered over a period of time is polarization. So polarization means people taking extreme viewpoints, and the distance in terms of psychological distance, social distance between people becoming wider. So if I am a believer of a certain political ideology or religion, I become an extreme person. Similarly, some other person also becomes an extreme believer of that thought process, a different thought process. So the distance between me and the other person becomes large. So we start hating each other and we start becoming enemies. Okay, so we are not listening to each other. We might differ in terms of certain elements, but even between two extreme positions, there can be somewhere a middle path where both of us can agree. So for creating new relationship, new experiences, to avoid polarization, it is important to have dissonance once in a while. Okay, so how to change attitudes? Especially when people have extreme attitudes or attitudes which may not help them in their growth, it is important to change the attitude. For example, I'll give a very simple example. Let's say attitude towards smoking. Young people, when they are in their late teenage or 20 to 25, there is a new, people tend to experiment on new things, especially things like smoking, drinking and things like that. And many times people start smoking because of peer pressure. And also in like our earlier chapters, I have spoken about role modeling. They think smoking is cool because the cinema hero also does it. Okay, so it is seen as something adult like or adventurous or masculine and things like that. So at this age, people have this opinion that smoking is cool and smoking creates a social status, and your peers also accept you when you smoke. Okay, so how to change this attitude? Because after a certain point, behaviors like this, so attitudes create a certain behavior. Attitude towards smoking, positive attitudes towards smoking because of misinformation leads to smoking behavior. In long run, it can cause health hazards and also dependence, addiction to those behaviors. So how to change people from those formation of such attitudes towards harmful behaviors? One, we can provide information. So maybe we can show these vulnerable group like late adolescents or young adults the harmful consequences of smoking. Give information as much as possible. Also reinforce attitude change. You have to reward people for attitude change. It may not necessarily a material reward. It can be a symbolic reward. For example, when people quit smoking, you can give them a certificate saying that or if you can give them a t-shirt which mentions I quit smoking, I walk towards positive change, something like that. Okay, which will make people feel proud about what they have done. So you can reward attitudes. One, first give information, and second thing is reward attitude change, and also they should see there is some reward in changing their existing attitude. And also one important way in which attitudes can be changed is providing opportunities to explore new situations, which means we form attitudes because we have encountered only certain kind of situations. We have not seen the other side of the story or the other side of the spectrum. Because we belong to a certain social group, and also knowingly, unknowingly, we choose only those kind of environments. For example, if I am a believer of a certain religious or a political ideology, the kind of material I read are only from those ideology. Two, the kind of people whom I interact are also from that particular ideology. My friends are also similar to me in terms of those ideologies. Maybe my parents and my relatives also are similar in that ideology. So I never had an opportunity to look outside or look beyond what I have encountered till now. So when you give people those newer situations where they will be able to see things holistically, then it gives them an opportunity to change. Okay. So till this point we looked at attitudes from a very general point of view, from a very social psychology point of view. Now we are going to look at workplace related attitudes. Attitudes play a very important role in workplace also, especially attitude towards work, attitude towards some intervention. For example, if the organization brings in a new initiative, a change initiative, how people look at this change initiative determines how well they adapt to it, and also how well they are open to it. So change management, workplace diversity. For example, if the workplace you are bringing in people of different cultures, different backgrounds, how the existing people react to it. Okay, attitude towards the organization, how do you look at the organization? So all these workplace attitudes play a very important role in influencing organizational performance. Okay, so we are going to look at three attitudes in workplace. The first one is work attitude towards your work. The second one is job satisfaction, at how satisfied a person is towards his or her job. Attitude towards co-workers, especially we are going to look at prejudice. If you remember, in perception also we looked at prejudice, but here we are going to look at it in detail, and also from the perspective of attitudes. Okay. So job satisfaction is nothing but how happy a person is with his or her job. So when I say happy, we measure happiness through satisfaction, whether they are fulfilled with what they are doing. And why it is important to have job satisfaction? Because people who are satisfied with their jobs, do they perform better than others? Not necessarily. In fact, this discussion also we had earlier. People who are satisfied with the job are not necessarily better performers, but they are more, they perform extra role performance, which means they go beyond what is expected from them. They tend to be helpful to others in the workplace. They tend to be loyal and things like that, loyal to their organization and profession and things like that. So it is important for the organization to create this sense of satisfaction among employees towards their job. So what makes people satisfied towards their job? So in fact, there are a lot of surveys done about this in many organizations and many cultures. Many of you would assume salary or reward as a major criteria, but in fact reward per se is not very important. In fact, there is some more than reward, it should be equitable. We'll talk about what is equitable reward later, but first let's start with the first point, which is mentally challenging job. In fact, more than monetary rewards, people are happy with their jobs only when it is challenging to them, when they find meaning in what they are doing. Okay, but you may ask the question, what if you don't get paid but it is a challenging job? Will people still continue? That we'll talk about it later. But just by rewards you cannot make people happy about their job. So the job should be inherently challenging and meaningful. The second point is equitable reward. When you say equitable reward, what it means is, it's not the absolute amount of the award or the reward. Reward means the pay package you get, salary you get. We don't look at how much I get. We don't stop at that level. We look at comparable others and see, compared to someone who is similar to me in terms of performance and level, how much do I get? So it's always about comparison, and it is also about compared to how I contribute, how much I contribute, do I get something which is fair? So it's all about fairness and equitability. Okay, we will look at equity theory in one of our chapters on motivation, where we will discuss this in detail. So it's not the absolute money, but fair amount of money. Third condition is supportive work conditions, which means I should have a workplace which is supportive, which should be conducive. My colleagues should be supportive, my boss should be supportive, my organization should help me grow in whatever I am doing. It should be concerned about my welfare, all those things. And also supportive colleagues. Another important thing about job satisfaction is personality job fit, which means the job which I am doing, it should fit my nature, or it should fit my inherent qualities, which is personality and job fit. And also some people are more satisfied or more prone to be satisfied than others, which means some people always crib about whatever they do, whatever they get. So those kind of people you cannot satisfy. But some people, they look at the positive elements in what they are doing and they get satisfied easily. So like I said, work environment play a very important role. Work environment, not necessarily psychological or social environment. It's not just about good colleagues and good boss and good people around you. It's also about the physical infrastructure. So if the workplace is like very prison like, so it will not lead to job satisfaction. Okay. Another important job attitude or work related attitude is organizational commitment. Organizational commitment means a person's attitude towards the organization which they belong to. So sometimes what can happen is, you might be happy with what you are doing, but you are not happy with your organization. You may dislike your organization, but you like what you are doing. Similarly, it can be other way around. You can like the organization, but you may not like the job. But many a times, job satisfaction and organizational commitment coexist. They influence each other. So organizational commitment means to what extent you are committed to the organization. In other words, to what extent you believe in what the organization believes in. Okay, if you remember, in one of those in the first chapter, we looked at we defined what is an organization. In that, we looked at organization has different goals, and also organization has different stakeholders. Each one of them have different goals. The role of the organization is to align employee goals and organizational goals. So organizational commitment means when this alignment happens, when the employees feel that their goals and organizational goals are similar, it leads to commitment. So a committed employee will be willing to put more effort on behalf of the organization. So they are willing to stretch beyond what is expected from them. So they will be very loyal, they will go and say good things about the organization, they will feel proud about their belongingness to the organization, they will feel part of the organization strongly. and also they will have strong desire to remain within the organization, which means they will not quit the organization easily. Even if they get better offers somewhere, they will try to stay in the organization. So which is good for the organization, because if employees leave the organizations, especially good performers leave the organization, it involves certain cost for the organization, isn't it? You have to recruit newer employees. Good performers leave, they also take away all the intangible information and network with them. So creating organizational commitment is important because it retains most of the times good employees in the organization. Okay. So organization towards your boss also matters. So I'll stop here. In the next class, we will talk about the attitude towards others, especially prejudice, and how to tackle or how to resolve prejudice and bias within the organization. Till then, take care. See you in the next class.